"But who do you say that I am?" When Jesus grew up and became aware of his dual nature, he chose to reveal himself as the Son of Man. This decision arose after he read the following passage in the Book of Enoch at the age of 15. The author of this so-called Book of Enoch described the work that this Son of Man would accomplish on earth. He explained that this Son of Man, before descending to earth to bring salvation to humanity, had walked through the courts of heavenly glory with his Father, and that he had turned his back on all this greatness and glory to descend to earth to proclaim salvation to suffering mortals. When the young Jesus read these passages, they resonated in his heart, and he decided that for his public ministry, he would adopt the title Son of Man. Jesus stayed with his apostles in Gaulanitis. This jurisdiction was under the rule of the tetrarch Philip, a brother of Herod Antipas. Philip was well-disposed towards Jesus. In his territory, they were safe from the long arm of the Sanhedrin. They were on their way to the capital, Caesarea-Philippi. During the lunch break, Jesus suddenly confronted the 12 for the first time with a question about himself. "Who do the people say that I am?" More than half of the apostles took part in answering this question. They told him that he was considered by all who knew him to be a prophet or an extraordinary man. Even his enemies were very afraid of him and explained his powers by accusing him of being in league with the prince of devils. They told him that some people in Judea and Samaria, who had not met him personally, believed that he was John the Baptist, risen from the dead. Peter explained that various people had compared him to Moses, Elijah, Isaiah, and Jeremiah. After hearing this report, Jesus stood up, looked down at the 12 who were sitting in a semicircle around him, pointed to them all with a broad gesture, and asked with surprising emphasis, "But who do you say that I am?" For a moment there was a tense silence. The eyes of the 12 remained fixed on the Master. Then Simon Peter jumped up and exclaimed, "You are the Redeemer, the Son of the living God." And the 11 still seated apostles stood up as one man, indicating that Peter had spoken for them all. Jesus gestured for them to sit down again and said, "This has been revealed to you by my Father. The hour has come for you to know the truth about me." Since his baptism by John in the Jordan and the transformation of water into wine at Cana, the apostles had almost accepted him as the Messiah on several occasions. For short periods, some of them had truly believed that he was the expected Redeemer. But whenever this hope arose in their hearts, Jesus would crush it with a crushing word or a disappointing act. They had long been in a state of turmoil due to the contradiction between the conception of the expected Messiah that lived in their consciousness and the experience of their extraordinary association with this extraordinary man, which they cherished in their hearts. The next morning, Simon Peter and Simon Zealot spoke earnestly with the other apostles to persuade them to wholeheartedly accept their Master not only as the Messiah but also as the divine Son of the living God. The two Simons were almost entirely in agreement in their opinions about Jesus, and they worked diligently to persuade their brothers to accept these insights as well. Although Andrew was the general leader of the apostles, his brother Simon Peter increasingly came to the forefront as the spokesman for the 12. At about 12 o'clock, when Jesus appeared, they were sitting in the garden. The apostles stood up, and all had a solemn expression on their faces. Jesus dispelled the tension with his kind and brotherly smile, which was so characteristic of him when his followers took themselves too seriously. With a commanding gesture, he indicated that they should sit down. After the meal, when they were discussing plans for the upcoming mission through the Decapolis, Jesus suddenly raised his head, looked at them, and said, "Now that a whole day has passed since you all agreed with Peter's declaration about the identity of the Son of Man, I want to ask if you still stand by this decision." When they heard this, the 12 stood up, and Peter took a few steps towards Jesus and said, "Yes, Master. We believe that you are the Son of the living God." Then Peter and his brothers sat down again. Jesus remained standing and said to the 12, "You are my chosen ambassadors, but I know that under the given circumstances, this faith cannot result from mere human reasoning. This is a revelation of the Spirit of my Father in the depths of your soul. And the insights given by the Spirit of my Father are the foundation on which the kingdom of heaven will be built. On the rock of this spiritual reality, I will build the living temple. By this temple, I mean the spiritual fellowship that continues after this earthly life in the eternal realities of my Father's kingdom. All the powers of evil and the hosts of sin will not prevail over this human brotherhood of the divine Spirit. The Spirit of my Father will be your divine guide and mentor. All power in heaven and on earth has been given to me, and I now hand over to you and your successors the keys of the outer kingdom. Jesus meant by this authority to build the kingdom of heaven in this material world, guided by the Word and the Spirit. You must not only avoid evil, but you must also actively do good. Jesus began to trust in the loyalty and integrity of his apostles. He thought of the trial that his followers would soon have to endure. He knew that in the near future, the expectations of his apostles would be shattered. But he trusted that these men, through their personal faith, would be able to recover and understand his words in a new light. Thus, they would be able to go out and enlighten a world that sat in darkness. On this day, Jesus began to have faith in the faith of his apostles, with one exception. Know, child of man, that your Jesus is still building this living temple on the same eternal foundation of his divine sonship. Every person who finds their identity as a child of God becomes a human building block in this living temple. The temple erected in honor of the love of the eternal Father. The new, essential feature of Peter's confession was the clearly articulated acknowledgement that Jesus was the Son of God, that his divinity was beyond doubt. His apostles had always seen him as the Messiah in various ways, but nowhere in the Jewish expectations was it stated that the Redeemer would be divine. The Jews had not taught that the Messiah would have a divine origin. Although he would be the Anointed One, they had not imagined him as a Son of God. Jesus' aim had been to live on earth as the Son of Man and thus fulfill his mission of self-bestowal. However, his followers repeatedly tended to identify him with the entrenched image of the long-expected Messiah. But he knew that he could never meet their messianic expectations. Jesus had tried to change their concept of the Messiah so that he could partially meet their expectations. But when even some of his most loyal apostles wanted to proclaim him king after the miraculous feeding, he realized that this plan had failed. Therefore, he chose to come forward with the third plan, to openly declare his divinity. By acknowledging the truth of Peter's confession and openly declaring to the 12 that he was the Son of God. For 3 years, Jesus had proclaimed that he was the Son of Man, while the apostles, during these same 3 years, increasingly inclined to believe that he was the expected Jewish Messiah. He now revealed to them that he was the Son of God, and decided to build the kingdom of heaven on the understanding of the combined nature of the Son of Man and the Son of God. He had decided to abandon further efforts to convince them that he was not the Messiah. He now intended to reveal to them who he truly was, and thereafter disregard their determination to see him as the Messiah. Neither Peter nor the other apostles had a very adequate understanding of the divinity of Jesus. They barely realized that this was the beginning of a new era in their master's earthly career. From this time onward, a new tone sounded in the master's message. Henceforth, the sole ideal in his life was the revelation of the Father, while he proclaimed the supreme wisdom in his teaching, which can only be understood by living it. He came so that we all might have life in abundance. The last period of his earthly career began here at Caesarea-Philippi and lasted until the crucifixion. Although during this period the majority of his followers still considered him the Messiah, his apostles began to see him as the Son of God. Peter's confession marked the beginning of this realization of the more complete and fuller truth. And so Jesus illustrated in his life what he taught in his religion: the growth of the spiritual nature through the method of living progress. He did not emphasize the constant struggle between soul and body, which his later followers did. He taught that the Spirit easily overcomes both and can effectively establish beneficial peace in many of these intellectual and instinctive conflicts. Everything Jesus taught from this point onward had a new meaning. In the time before Caesarea-Philippi, he brought the gospel of the kingdom as the first teacher of this gospel. After Caesarea-Philippi, he not only acted as a teacher but also as the divine representative of the Eternal Father, who is the center and circumference of this spiritual kingdom. Jesus had earnestly tried to lead his followers into the spiritual kingdom as a teacher, and then as a teacher-healer, but they would not accept it that way. He knew very well that his mission on earth could not possibly fulfill the messianic expectations of the Jewish people. The prophets of old had depicted a Messiah that he could never be. He tried to establish the kingdom of his heavenly Father here on earth, as the Son of Man. But his followers made no progress. Seeing this, Jesus then chose to partially accommodate his believers. From this time onward, he openly took on the role of the Son of God. Consequently, the apostles heard much that was new. They heard several extraordinary statements, such as the following: "Do not think that when I am no longer with you, the world will treat you better than it treated me. If you love me, then prepare yourselves to prove this love by being ready to make the supreme sacrifice. And listen carefully to what I tell you. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. The Son of Man has not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a gift for all. I have come to seek and to save those who are lost. No one in this world can see the Father except the Son who has come from the Father. Yet if the Son is lifted up, he will draw all people to himself, and everyone who believes in this truth of the combined nature of the Son will be endowed with eternal life. You cannot yet openly proclaim that the Son of God is among you, but it has been revealed to you. Therefore, I speak openly about these mysteries. Although I stand before you in this physical form, I have come from God the Father. Before Abraham was, I am. I have truly come from the Father to this world, and I tell you that I must soon leave this world to return to the work of my Father. My kingdom is not of this world. Even though the foxes have dens and the birds of the air have nests, the Son of God has no place to lay his head. Nevertheless, I tell you that the Father and I are one. He who has seen me has seen the Father. My Father cooperates with me in all these things and will never leave me alone in my mission. Although we will soon be physically separated, I will not leave you spiritually when you go forth to proclaim this gospel to the whole world. Now I have secluded you with me for a short time so that you may experience the glory and understand the greatness of the life to which I have called you. You are chosen to establish the kingdom of my Father in the hearts of people. Building a community of believers who belong to me, and who respond to this gospel and develop a living communion with God in their soul. The apostles listened silently to these astonishing statements. They were speechless. They broke into small groups to discuss and contemplate the Master's words. They had confessed that he was the Son of God, but they could not yet grasp the full meaning.